The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of the Henderson home in San Antonio, Texas, casting delicate shadows across the hardwood floors. Rebecca Henderson stood at the kitchen counter, her hands trembling slightly as she poured her second cup of coffee. At 52, she had always prided herself on her steady hands, a necessity in her 30 years as a cardiac nurse at Methodist Hospital. But lately, those hands betrayed her more often than she cared to admit. Outside, the Texas heat was already building, promising another scorcher of a day. The cicadas hummed their relentless symphony, a sound so familiar to Rebecca that she barely noticed it anymore. She glanced at the calendar hanging on the refrigerator, marked with red circles around dates that stretched into the next 6 months. George's farewell tour, the culmination of a career that had spanned decades, touching millions of lives with his music. Rebecca pressed her palm against her chest, feeling the irregular flutter beneath her ribs. It had started 3 months ago, just a slight irregularity, easy to dismiss as stress or too much caffeine. But as a cardiac nurse, she knew better. She had seen enough patients ignore the warning signs, convincing themselves it was nothing until it was too late. The appointment with Dr. William Crawford had confirmed her worst fears: severe mitral valve regurgitation with early signs of heart failure. The valve wasn't closing properly, causing blood to flow backward with each heartbeat. Surgery was inevitable, and the sooner the better. "The risks increase the longer we wait, Rebecca," Dr. Crawford had said, his kind eyes filled with concern. "You know this better than anyone. We need to schedule you within the next 2 months." But how could she? George had been planning this tour for 3 years. It was his gift to his fans, his way of saying thank you for a lifetime of support. Venues were booked, tickets sold out within hours, and the crew had been assembled. Canceling wasn't just about disappointing fans. It would devastate George, cost hundreds of people their jobs, and potentially bankrupt the production company that had invested millions. Rebecca took a deep breath and walked to the living room, where photographs covered nearly every surface. George accepting his CMA award. Their wedding day in 1971, both of them so young and full of dreams. Their children, Jennifer Lynn and George Jr., whom everyone called Buddy at various stages of their lives. Family vacations, Christmas mornings, quiet moments captured in time. This house held 42 years of memories. Rebecca had been there through every triumph and every setback. When George was still playing small honky-tonks for beer money, she had worked double shifts at the hospital to keep them afloat. When their son, Buddy, had been born premature, spending 3 weeks in the NICU, George had held her hand through every terrifying night. They had weathered storms that would have broken other couples, emerging stronger each time. The front door opened, and George walked in, his boots clicking against the floor. Even at 62, he carried himself with the easy confidence that had first attracted Rebecca all those years ago. His face was weathered from years on the road, but his smile still made her heart skip. Though lately, that skipping had taken on a more ominous meaning. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, hanging his white Stetson on the rack by the door. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Rebecca replied, forcing brightness into her voice. "How was the meeting with Daniel?" George crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. She breathed in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with leather and Texas dust. "Daniel thinks we should add 2 more dates in Houston," George said. "The demand is crazy, Becca. Folks are offering 3 times face value for tickets on the secondary market." Daniel Foster was George's tour manager, a meticulous man who had been with them for 15 years. Rebecca liked him. He treated George like family and always made sure the schedule included time for George to come home between show clusters. "That sounds wonderful," Rebecca said, her voice catching slightly. George pulled back, studying her face with the intensity that came from decades of reading her moods. "You feeling okay? You look a little pale." "Just tired," she lied, hating herself for it. "I worked a double shift yesterday." "Mrs. Patterson, you remember her from church? She had a stent procedure, and I wanted to be there." It wasn't entirely a lie. She had worked the double shift, though it had exhausted her far more than usual. The fatigue was getting harder to hide. "You work too hard," George said, brushing a strand of auburn hair, now streaked with silver, away from her face. "Maybe you should think about retiring. We don't need the money, and I worry about you pushing yourself." Rebecca's throat tightened. Retiring would make sense if she was about to have major surgery, but she couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not when he was so excited about the tour. "I like working," she said. "It gives me something to do when you're on the road." George's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a slight grimace. "That's the band. We've got rehearsal this afternoon. You sure you're okay?" "I'm perfect," Rebecca said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "Go make beautiful music." After George left, Rebecca sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out the folder Dr. Crawford had given her. Inside were pamphlets about valve replacement surgery, recovery timelines, and statistics that she already knew by heart. The surgery had a 95% success rate in healthy patients. But there were always risks: infection, stroke, complications from anesthesia. Her phone rang, and she saw Jennifer's name on the screen. Her daughter called every few days, usually during her lunch break from the law firm where she worked in Austin. "Hey, Mom," Jennifer's voice came through, warm and energetic. "Just checking in. How are you and Dad?" "We're good, honey," Rebecca said. "Your father is excited about the tour. You should see him. He's like a kid at Christmas." "I know. He called me yesterday to make sure Buddy and I had tickets for the Dallas show. As if we'd miss it." Jennifer paused. "You sound tired, Mom. Are you sure everything's okay?" Rebecca closed her eyes. Jennifer had always been perceptive, even as a child. She had inherited her father's musical talent and her mother's analytical mind, making her a formidable attorney. "Just busy at work," Rebecca said. "Nothing to worry about." They chatted for a few more minutes about Jennifer's cases and her husband, Patrick Donnelly, who was a high school history teacher. When they hung up, Rebecca felt the weight of her secret pressing down even harder. That evening, Rebecca and George sat on their back porch, watching the sun set over the Texas hill country. The sky blazed orange and pink, and the temperature finally began to drop to something bearable. "Remember when we bought this place?" George asked, his hand finding hers. "You said the porch sold you on it." "I said the porch, and the fact that it was the only house we could afford," Rebecca corrected with a smile. "But yes, I loved this porch from the first moment." They had bought the house in 1978, when George's career was just beginning to take off. It had been a fixer-upper, and they had spent years gradually renovating it, doing much of the work themselves. Now it was worth more than they ever could have imagined. But Rebecca wouldn't have traded it for a mansion. "I've been thinking," George said slowly. "After this tour, maybe we should travel. Really travel. Europe, Australia. Places we've always talked about but never had time for." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "That sounds wonderful." "You've spent your whole life taking care of me and the kids and your patients," George continued. "It's time someone took care of you. If only he knew how much she needed that care right now." But Rebecca swallowed her tears and squeezed his hand. "You've always taken care of me," she said softly. "Every single day." The next morning, Rebecca met her best friend, Linda Walsh, for breakfast at their favorite diner on the River Walk. Linda had been Rebecca's friend since nursing school, and they had been through everything together. Marriages, children, career challenges, and the loss of Linda's husband to cancer 5 years ago. Linda took one look at Rebecca and set down her coffee cup with a concerned expression. "Okay. Spill. What's wrong?" Rebecca had planned to keep the secret from everyone. But looking at Linda's familiar face, the words tumbled out. She told her everything. The diagnosis, Dr. Crawford's recommendation, her decision to wait until after the tour. Linda listened without interrupting. But when Rebecca finished, her expression was stern. "You can't do this, Becca. You can't risk your life for a tour." "It's not just a tour," Rebecca protested. "It's George's legacy. It's not worth dying for," Linda interrupted. "What do you think would happen to George if something happened to you because you waited? How do you think he'd feel, knowing you kept this from him?" Rebecca stared at her plate, her eggs growing cold. "The surgery has a 95% success rate, and that 5% terrifies you, which is why you're putting it off," Linda said, reaching across the table to take Rebecca's hand. "But honey, the longer you wait, the more that percentage shifts. You know that." "I just need to get through the tour," Rebecca said. "It's 6 months. Dr. Crawford said I have some time." "Some time doesn't mean forever," Linda replied. "And what happens if you have a cardiac event during those 6 months? What if you collapse at work or at home? What if you're driving?" These were all thoughts that had haunted Rebecca's sleepless nights, but hearing them spoken aloud made them more real, more terrifying. "I'll be careful," Rebecca said. "I'm monitoring myself constantly. At the first sign of deterioration, I'll tell George everything." Linda looked like she wanted to argue further, but she sighed instead. "Promise me something. Promise me you'll tell him before it gets worse. Don't wait until it's an emergency." "I promise," Rebecca said, though she wasn't sure it was a promise she could keep. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca became an expert at hiding her symptoms. When the shortness of breath struck, she made excuses about allergies or the heat. When her ankle swelled, she blamed long shifts at the hospital. When fatigue overwhelmed her, she claimed she wasn't sleeping well. George was so consumed with tour preparations that he didn't notice the small changes. Rebecca told herself that was a blessing, that she was protecting him. But late at night, when she lay awake listening to his steady breathing beside her, guilt gnawed at her conscience. The tour's opening night was in Houston, just 2 hours from San Antonio. Rebecca stood backstage, watching George command the stage with the same magnetism that had captivated audiences for 40 years. The crowd sang along to every word, their voices rising in a collective celebration of the music that had been the soundtrack to their lives. "He's incredible, isn't he?" Daniel Foster said, appearing at Rebecca's side. "After all these years, he still gives everything he has." "He does," Rebecca agreed, her chest swelling with pride and something else, a tightness that had become her constant companion. "You okay, Mrs. H?" Daniel asked, using the nickname the crew had given her years ago. "You look a little flushed." "It's hot back here," Rebecca said, fanning herself with the program. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. As George launched into Amarillo by Morning, one of his signature songs, Rebecca felt the familiar flutter in her chest intensify. The backstage area tilted slightly, and she gripped the nearby equipment case for support. "Mrs. H?" Daniel's voice seemed to come from far away. "I just need some air," Rebecca managed to say, forcing her legs to carry her toward the exit. She made it to the hallway before her knees buckled. Daniel caught her, his strong hands keeping her from hitting the concrete floor. "Someone get a medic!" Daniel shouted, his voice sharp with alarm. "No!" Rebecca gasped. "Don't! George is performing. Don't interrupt him." "Ma'am, you just about passed out," Daniel said. "We need to get you checked out." A crew member appeared with a folding chair, and Daniel eased Rebecca into it. Someone else brought water. Rebecca sipped it slowly, willing her heart to steady, her vision to clear. I'm okay, she insisted. It was just the heat. Please, Daniel, don't tell George. Not tonight. Let him have this opening night. Daniel looked torn, his loyalty to George warring with his concern for Rebecca. Finally, he nodded. Only if you promise to see a doctor tomorrow. And if this happens again, I'm telling him immediately. Deal, Rebecca said, relief washing over her. By the time George came off stage, exhilarated and sweating from the performance, Rebecca had composed herself. She hugged him, told him how proud she was, and smiled through the celebration that followed. But that night, lying in their hotel room, Rebecca made a decision. She would tell George after the next show. She would explain everything and let him decide what to do. Linda was right. She couldn't keep risking her life, couldn't keep lying to the person she loved most. The next show was in 2 days in Dallas. After that, she would tell him. After that, they would face this together. Whatever it meant for the tour, for their future, for everything they had built. Rebecca fell asleep with that resolution firmly in mind, not knowing that fate would force her hand much sooner than she planned. The Dallas morning arrived with an unseasonable chill that made Rebecca grateful for the warmth of the hotel suite. George was already up, going through his vocal warm-ups in the bathroom, his voice echoing off the marble tiles. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed, her chest tight, with more than just her heart condition. Today. She would tell him today, after breakfast, before the sound check. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "See you tonight, Mom. Can't wait for Dad's show. Buddy and I are driving in together." Rebecca's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to tell her daughter everything, to unburden herself of this crushing weight. Instead, she typed, "Can't wait to see you both. Drive safe." George emerged from the bathroom, his hair still damp from the shower. "You ready for breakfast? I told Daniel and the band we'd meet them downstairs at 9. "Actually," Rebecca began, her mouth dry, "I was hoping we could talk first. Just the two of us." George's expression shifted immediately, concern replacing his earlier cheerfulness. He sat beside her on the bed, taking her hand. "What's wrong?" Before Rebecca could answer, George's phone rang. He glanced at it, started to decline the call, but Rebecca saw her son's name on the screen. "Answer it," she said. "It's Buddy." George put the phone on speaker. "Hey, son, you on your way?" Buddy's voice came through, rushed and breathless. "Dad, listen. I'm still in Houston. My flight got canceled, and there's nothing else available until tonight. I might miss the show." "Don't worry about it," George said. "We'll get you on another flight. Let me have Daniel make some calls." "I'm trying everything," Buddy said. "I just didn't want you wondering where I was." After a few more minutes of conversation, George hung up and immediately called Daniel. As he worked through the logistics of getting their son to Dallas, Rebecca felt her courage slipping away. This wasn't the right time. There were too many moving pieces, too many people counting on George. "Rebecca?" George said, ending his call with Daniel. "You wanted to talk?" She looked at his face, saw the love and concern there, and felt her resolve crumble. "I was just going to say that I'm so proud of you, and that I love you." George smiled, though his eyes remained questioning. "I love you too, sweetheart." "But that's not what you were going to say, was it?" Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs, the irregular rhythm more pronounced than ever. "George, A knock at the door interrupted her. Daniel's voice called from the hallway. "George, we've got a problem with the sound system. The venue needs you there now." George stood reluctantly. "Hold that thought. Whatever it is, we'll talk after the sound check. Okay?" Rebecca nodded, relief and frustration warring inside her. "Okay." At the AT&T Stadium, Rebecca found herself swept up in the controlled chaos of tour preparation. The venue was massive, capable of holding 80,000 people, and every seat had been sold within hours of tickets going on sale. The stage crew worked like a synchronized machine, each person knowing exactly what needed to be done. Rebecca sat in the VIP area, watching George work with the sound engineers. His professionalism never ceased to amaze her. He might be a superstar, but he treated every crew member with respect, learning their names, asking about their families. "Mrs. Henderson?" Rebecca turned to find a young woman with a clipboard and a headset. "Yes? I'm Chelsea Armstrong, Mr. Strait's new publicity coordinator. It's such an honor to meet you. George talks about you constantly." "That's sweet of you to say," Rebecca replied, managing a smile despite the increasing pressure in her chest. "I was wondering if you might have a few minutes later to talk about the tour documentary we're filming," Chelsea continued. "We'd love to include some interview segments with family members. Your perspective as his wife would be invaluable." The thought of being on camera, pretending everything was fine, made Rebecca's stomach turn. "I'm not sure I'd be very interesting," she deflected. "George is the story, not me. But you've been his partner through everything," Chelsea pressed gently. "That's an incredible story in itself." Rebecca was saved from answering by Jennifer's arrival. Her daughter appeared in the VIP section, looking professional in her work attire, though she'd clearly dressed down from her usual courtroom style. "Mom!" Jennifer embraced her, and Rebecca held on perhaps a moment too long. When they separated, Jennifer studied her mother's face with the same intensity George had shown. "Are you feeling okay? You look tired." "I'm fine," Rebecca said automatically, the lie now so practiced it came easily. "Where's Patrick?" "He'll be here later. He had parent-teacher conferences." Jennifer sat down, and Chelsea took it as her cue to leave. Once they were alone, Jennifer leaned in closer. "Mom, seriously, what's going on? You've been off lately." Rebecca opened her mouth to tell her daughter everything, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she burden Jennifer with this when she hadn't even told George? "It's just been a busy few weeks," Rebecca said. "Work has been intense." Jennifer didn't look convinced, but before she could press further, Buddy arrived, slightly disheveled from his rushed journey. At 38, he had inherited his father's build and his mother's sharp mind. He worked as a financial advisor in Houston, a career that suited his analytical nature. "Made it," Buddy announced, hugging both his mother and sister. "Though I think I broke several traffic laws getting here." "Buddy, you didn't," Jennifer said, her lawyer voice coming through. "Relax, sis. I'm kidding." Buddy grinned, then looked at Rebecca more closely. "Mom, you okay? You're pale." "I'm fine," Rebecca said, irritation creeping into her voice. "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" The sharpness of her tone made both her children exchange glances. Rebecca immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired. Let's go say hello to your father." They made their way down to the stage area, where George was working through The Chair, one of his classic hits. When he saw his family, his face lit up with genuine joy. This was what Rebecca had been trying to protect. These moments of pure happiness, unburdened by worry or fear. During a break in the sound check, the family gathered backstage. George put his arms around Jennifer and Buddy, pulling them close. "Having you both here means the world to me," he said. "This tour is as much for you as it is for the fans. You've sacrificed so much over the years." "Dad, we're proud of you," Jennifer said. "We always have been." Buddy nodded in agreement. "Remember when we were kids and you'd be gone for weeks at a time? We thought you had the coolest job in the world. Your mother was the one who made it possible," George said, looking at Rebecca with such love that her heart ached, both metaphorically and physically. She's the glue that held this family together. Rebecca felt the pressure in her chest intensify. The room suddenly seemed too warm, too crowded. She needed air, space to breathe. "Excuse me," she managed to say, standing abruptly. "I need to use the restroom." She made it to the hallway before the dizziness hit. The walls tilted, and Rebecca pressed her hand against the concrete to steady herself. Her heart was racing now, the rhythm completely erratic. She knew these symptoms, knew them all too well from her years of treating patients. She was going into atrial fibrillation. Rebecca? She looked up to see Linda Walsh hurrying toward her. Rebecca had forgotten that Linda had tickets for tonight's show and had planned to come early to see her. "Linda!" Rebecca gasped, relief flooding through her at the sight of her friend. I can't." Linda reached her just as Rebecca's knees buckled. "Someone call 911!" Linda shouted, easing Rebecca to the floor. "Rebecca, stay with me. Breathe slowly." The next few minutes passed in a blur. Rebecca was aware of voices, of people gathering around, of Linda's steady presence beside her. Then George was there, his face white with terror, his hands trembling as he reached for her. Becca, what's happening?" "I'm sorry," Rebecca whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." The paramedics arrived quickly, the benefit of being in a major stadium with medical staff on site. As they checked her vitals, Rebecca saw the concern in their faces. Her heart rate was dangerously high, her blood pressure dropping. "We need to transport her to Baylor University Medical Center," one paramedic said. "Sir, are you family?" "I'm her husband," George said, his voice breaking. "I'm going with her." "Dad, we're coming too," Jennifer said, appearing at his side with Buddy. As they loaded Rebecca onto the stretcher, Daniel Foster appeared, his face stricken. "George, the show!" "Cancel it," George said without hesitation. "Cancel everything." "No," Rebecca tried to protest, but her voice was weak. "George, you can't." "The only thing I can't do is leave you," George said, gripping her hand as they wheeled her toward the ambulance. "Nothing else matters, Becca. Nothing." At the hospital, Rebecca was immediately taken to the cardiac unit. Jennifer and Buddy sat in the waiting room while George was allowed to stay with Rebecca as doctors ran tests. The emergency room physician, Dr. Nathan Phillips, had kind eyes but a grave expression. "Mrs. Henderson, you're in atrial fibrillation, and your heart is showing signs of significant strain," Dr. Phillips said. "Have you been experiencing symptoms?" Rebecca looked at George, saw the fear and confusion in his eyes, and knew she could no longer hide the truth. "Yes," she whispered. "For months." George's face went even paler. "Months? Becca, why didn't you tell me?" "I'm going to give you two a moment," Dr. Phillips said tactfully, stepping out of the room. Once they were alone, Rebecca began to cry in earnest. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, George. I didn't want to ruin the tour. I didn't want—" "Ruin the tour?" George's voice was incredulous. "You thought I'd care more about a tour than your life?" "It's your legacy," Rebecca sobbed. "It's everything you've worked for." "You are everything I've worked for," George said fiercely, taking her face in his hands. "Every song, every performance, every moment of success. It was all for you. For us. Don't you understand that?" "I have a bad valve," Rebecca confessed, the words tumbling out now. "Mitral valve regurgitation with early heart failure. I need surgery. Dr. Crawford wanted to schedule it weeks ago, but I said no. I wanted you to have your tour." George sat down heavily in the chair beside her bed, his face in his hands. For a moment, Rebecca thought he was angry, but when he looked up, she saw only tears. "How could you keep this from me?" he asked quietly. "How could you carry this alone?" "I'm sorry," Rebecca repeated helplessly. "I thought I was doing the right thing." George stood and gathered her carefully into his arms, mindful of the IV lines and monitoring equipment. "The right thing is trusting me, trusting us." We faced everything together for 42 years. Why would you think this would be different? Because this was your dream, Rebecca said against his chest. And I've spent so many years supporting your dreams that I didn't want to be the reason another one died. My only dream is growing old with you, George said, pulling back to look at her. Everything else is just noise. Dr. Phillips returned with another physician, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and a confident demeanor. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, this is Dr. Victoria Hayes. She's our chief of cardiothoracic surgery. Dr. Hayes shook both their hands before pulling up Rebecca's chart on a tablet. I've reviewed your case, Mrs. Henderson. We need to stabilize you first, get you out of atrial fibrillation, and manage your heart failure symptoms. Once you're stable, we'll schedule your valve replacement surgery. How soon? George asked. If we can stabilize her within the next few days, I'd want to operate within 2 weeks, Dr. Hayes said. The sooner, the better. Your heart is under significant strain, Rebecca. Waiting longer increases the risks substantially. Rebecca nodded, feeling both terrified and relieved. The secret was out. The decision was being made. She no longer had to carry this burden alone. Jennifer and Buddy were allowed in once Rebecca was settled in a private room. Both her children looked shell-shocked, and Rebecca's heart broke at the fear in their eyes. How long have you known? Jennifer asked, her lawyer's instinct for facts kicking in even through her emotion. 3 months, Rebecca admitted. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Mom, Buddy said, his voice thick with emotion. We're your kids. We had a right to know. I know, Rebecca said. I was wrong. I was trying to protect everyone. And instead, I just made everything worse. The family stayed with Rebecca through the evening as doctors worked to stabilize her heart rhythm. George never left her side, holding her hand through every procedure, every medication adjustment, every moment of fear. Around midnight, when the children had finally been convinced to go get some rest at a nearby hotel, George pulled his chair close to Rebecca's bedside. I called Daniel, he said quietly. The tour is postponed indefinitely. George, no arguments, he said firmly. We're refunding tickets, rescheduling dates, whatever it takes. The fans will understand, and if they don't, that's their problem. But the crew, Rebecca protested weakly. All those people depending on the income. Daniel's working it out, George assured her. We're keeping everyone on payroll. Some will move to other tours temporarily. It's not ideal, but it's manageable. Rebecca felt fresh tears slide down her cheeks. I've ruined everything. You've ruined nothing, George said, wiping her tears with his thumb. Do you remember our wedding vows? In sickness and in health? That wasn't just words, Becca. That was a promise. And I've never broken a promise to you. I love you, Rebecca whispered. I'm so scared. I know, sweetheart. I'm scared too. George climbed carefully onto the hospital bed beside her, mindful of the wires and tubes, and held her close. But we're going to get through this. Together, like we always have. As Rebecca drifted off to sleep, lulled by the steady beating of George's heart against her ear, she realized that keeping the secret had been more exhausting than facing the truth could ever be. Whatever lay ahead, surgery, recovery, uncertainty, at least now they would face it as they faced everything else, side by side. The next 48 hours passed in a haze of medical interventions and difficult conversations. Rebecca's heart rhythm was eventually restored to normal sinus rhythm through a combination of medications, but Dr. Hayes was clear about the urgency of surgery. Your heart is functioning at about 40% capacity, Dr. Hayes explained during a family meeting on Rebecca's third day in the hospital. The damaged valve is forcing your heart to work much harder than it should. Every day we delay increases the risk of permanent damage. George sat beside Rebecca's bed, his hand never leaving hers. Jennifer and Buddy occupied the two chairs on the other side, both looking exhausted from the stress of the past few days. Patrick Donnelly, Jennifer's husband, stood behind his wife, his hand on her shoulder. "What are the risks of the surgery?" Buddy asked, his financial advisor brain needing to analyze all the data. Dr. Hayes pulled up images on her tablet, showing Rebecca's compromised valve. With someone Rebecca's age and generally good health, the success rate is about 93%. The main risks are infection, bleeding, stroke, or complications from anesthesia. We'll also need to decide between a mechanical valve and a biological one. "What's the difference?" George asked. "A mechanical valve lasts longer, potentially the rest of Rebecca's life, but requires lifelong blood thinners," Dr. Hayes explained. "A biological valve, typically from a cow or pig, doesn't require blood thinners, but usually needs replacement after 10 to 15 years. Rebecca had already researched this extensively during her months of secret knowledge. "I want the biological valve," she said. "The thought of being on blood thinners forever, worrying about bleeding risks, I can't do that." "Even if it means another surgery down the line?" Dr. Hayes asked. "Even then," Rebecca confirmed, looking at George. "I'd rather have a more normal life for however many years we have together." George squeezed her hand. "Whatever you want, Becca. I'm with you either way." Dr. Hayes scheduled the surgery for the following Thursday, 5 days away. The delay would allow Rebecca's heart to strengthen slightly with medications and give the family time to prepare. That evening, after the children had left, George climbed into the hospital bed with Rebecca again, a nightly ritual that the nurses had stopped trying to prevent. They understood that some healing had nothing to do with medicine. "I keep thinking about all the time I've wasted," George said quietly into the darkness. "All those nights on tour buses, in hotels, away from home. I could have been with you instead." "Don't do that," Rebecca said, turning carefully to face him. "Your music has brought joy to millions of people. That matters, George. It's important." "It's not as important as you," he insisted. "After this is over, after you're recovered, I'm done." "Done with what?" "Touring, recording, all of it." George's voice was firm. "I'll finish this farewell tour once you're well enough, and then I'm retiring for real. No more time away from you." Rebecca felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of her was touched by his devotion. Part of her worried he'd regret it. "George, you love performing. It's part of who you are." "I love you more," he said simply. "And I'm 62 years old. I've had an incredible career. It's time to focus on what really matters." Before Rebecca could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. Linda Walsh peeked in, carrying a small overnight bag. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Linda said. "I brought you some things from home. Your good robe, your own pillow, those mystery novels you like." "Linda, you didn't have to do that," Rebecca said, though she was grateful. The hospital pillows were terrible. "Of course I did," Linda replied, settling into the visitor's chair. "George, you look exhausted. Why don't you go to the hotel, get a real shower, some actual sleep?" "I'll stay with Rebecca tonight." George looked reluctant, but Rebecca nodded. "Go. You need rest, too. I'll be fine with Linda here." After some convincing, George finally agreed. He kissed Rebecca tenderly, made Linda promise to call if anything changed, and left with obvious reluctance. Once they were alone, Linda pulled her chair closer to the bed. "Okay, now tell me how you're really feeling." Rebecca appreciated Linda's directness. It was one of the things she loved most about their friendship. "Terrified," she admitted. "I keep thinking about that 7% failure rate." "That's 93% success," Linda corrected. "And you're strong, Becca. You're going to get through this." "What if I don't?" Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "What happens to George?" to Jennifer and Buddy. "I've spent my whole life taking care of them. Who takes care of them if I'm gone?" Linda took Rebecca's hand. "First of all, you're not going anywhere. Second, your family is stronger than you think. You raised two incredible children who are fully capable adults. And George, well, he'd be devastated. But he'd survive because that's what people do. They survive." "I don't want him to just survive," Rebecca said, tears spilling over. "I want him to thrive. I want us to have those trips we've talked about, those quiet years of just being together." "Then fight for it," Linda said firmly. "You've spent 3 months trying to protect everyone else. Now it's time to fight for yourself, for your life, for your future." The conversation shifted to lighter topics: hospital gossip from Methodist Hospital, Linda's ongoing battle with her daughter over wedding plans, the new restaurant that had opened on the River Walk. It was exactly what Rebecca needed: normalcy in the midst of chaos. The next few days fell into a routine. Mornings began with Dr. Hayes's rounds, during which Rebecca's progress was assessed. Her heart function was improving slightly with medication, though not enough to avoid surgery. George arrived each day by 7, bringing coffee for Rebecca. Decaf now, doctor's orders, and staying until the nurses kicked him out at night. Jennifer came during her lunch breaks, always arriving with legal pads full of questions she'd researched online. Buddy visited in the evenings, often bringing takeout for his father to ensure George ate something. Patrick came when he could, his quiet presence a comfort to the family. On Tuesday, Dr. William Crawford visited. Rebecca's regular cardiologist looked genuinely distressed as he entered her room. "Rebecca, I owe you an apology," Dr. Crawford said. "I should have insisted more strongly that you have the surgery immediately. I should have—" "Stop," Rebecca interrupted. "This wasn't your fault. I'm a stubborn woman who made her own choices. Bad choices, but mine." "Still," Dr. Crawford said, "I've known you for years. I should have recognized that you'd put others first, even at your own expense." George, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "We all underestimated how much she'd sacrifice. That's on us, not you, Dr. Crawford." The conversation turned to the surgery itself. Dr. Crawford would be assisting Dr. Hayes, providing continuity of care that made Rebecca feel more secure. "You're in excellent hands with Victoria," Dr. Crawford assured them. "I've seen her perform miracles. Your valve repair is well within her capabilities." That evening, Chelsea Armstrong, the publicity coordinator, appeared with a tablet and a hesitant expression. "Mr. Strait, I'm so sorry to bother you, but we need to address the media situation." George's jaw tightened. Since postponing the tour, speculation had run rampant. Some outlets reported everything from George having cancer to the tour being permanently canceled due to creative differences. "The truth is getting lost in rumors," Chelsea said carefully. "If you wanted to make a statement, nothing detailed, just enough to stop the wild speculation, I think it would help." George looked at Rebecca. "It's your call, sweetheart. It's your privacy." Rebecca thought about it. She had always been private, staying out of the spotlight while George took center stage. But Linda's words echoed in her mind. "Fight for yourself." "Let's tell them," Rebecca said. "The truth, that I need surgery and we're postponing the tour. Maybe it'll help someone else. Someone who's ignoring their own symptoms to take care of everyone else." Chelsea's face brightened. "I could draft something for your approval. Very straightforward. Focused on asking for privacy during this time." The statement went out the next morning, Wednesday, just 1 day before Rebecca's surgery. It was simple and direct. Rebecca Henderson, wife of George Strait, will undergo heart valve replacement surgery this week. The family asks for privacy during this time. The farewell tour will be rescheduled once Rebecca has recovered. Thank you for your understanding and prayers. The response was overwhelming. Flowers, cards, and messages poured into the hospital. Fans from around the world sent their love and support. Several country music artists posted messages on social media, expressing their prayers for Rebecca's recovery. I had no idea so many people cared, Rebecca said, reading through the messages on Jennifer's phone. You've been part of Dad's story forever, Jennifer said. People feel like they know you, even if you've never met. That night, Rebecca couldn't sleep. Tomorrow was surgery day, and the reality of it pressed down on her chest more heavily than her damaged heart. George lay beside her, his breathing steady, but she knew he wasn't sleeping either. "George," she whispered, "I'm here. If something goes wrong tomorrow—" "Don't," George said, his voice rough. "Don't say it." "I have to," Rebecca insisted. "If something goes wrong, I need you to know that these 42 years were the best of my life, that I've never regretted a single moment, that you made me happier than I ever dreamed possible." George was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "The day I met you at that honky-tonk in Kerrville, my life changed. You were wearing a blue dress, and you told me I was off-key on the chorus of Your Cheatin' Heart." Rebecca laughed softly, remembering. "You were off-key. I know, but instead of being offended, I was fascinated. Here was this beautiful woman who wasn't afraid to be honest with me." George tightened his arms around her. "Every good thing in my life stems from that moment. Our children, our home, my career, none of it would have happened without you." "I love you," Rebecca whispered. "I love you too. And tomorrow, when you're in that operating room, you fight. You fight with everything you have to come back to me, Becca. Because I'm not ready to let you go. I won't ever be ready." They held each other in the darkness, two people who had built a life together brick by brick, facing the possibility that it all might crumble. But in that moment, surrounded by the steady beep of monitors and the quiet hum of the hospital, they found peace in each other's presence. Tomorrow would bring uncertainty and risk, but tonight, they had each other, and that was enough. Thursday morning arrived with a gray sky that matched Rebecca's mood. She had been up since 4, unable to sleep, her mind racing through everything that could go wrong. George had dozed fitfully in the chair beside her bed, unwilling to leave even for a few hours. At 5:30, the pre-op nurse arrived to begin preparations. Rebecca changed into a surgical gown, removed her wedding ring for the first time in 42 years, and placed it in George's hand. "Keep it safe for me," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "Always," George replied, sliding it onto his pinky finger where it fit snugly. Jennifer and Buddy arrived at 6, both looking like they hadn't slept much either. The family gathered around Rebecca's bed, their circle of love a tangible force in the sterile room. Dr. Hayes came by at 6:30 to review the procedure one final time. "We're looking at about 4 to 5 hours of surgery," she explained. "We'll remove the damaged valve, implant the biological replacement, ensure everything is functioning properly, and close you up. You'll be in ICU for at least 24 hours post-op, then moved to a regular room for recovery." "And the recovery timeline?" Buddy asked, his need for concrete information a coping mechanism. 6 to 8 weeks before she's feeling close to normal, Dr. Hayes said. 3 months before full recovery. She'll need cardiac rehab, medication management, and regular follow-ups. At 7 o'clock, the transport team arrived. This was it, the moment Rebecca had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. George walked alongside the gurney as they wheeled Rebecca toward the surgical suite, his hand gripping hers. Jennifer and Buddy followed, along with Patrick and Linda, who had arrived early to support the family. At the doors to the surgical area, they had to stop. This was as far as the family could go. "I'll see you on the other side," Rebecca said, looking at each of her loved ones. To Jennifer and Buddy, "Take care of your father." To George, "Don't forget to eat." George leaned down and kissed her. A kiss that held 42 years of love, passion, partnership, and promise. "Come back to me," he whispered against her lips. "Always," Rebecca replied, echoing his earlier promise. Then she was through the doors, and George's hand slipped from hers. The last thing she saw before the surgical team surrounded her was her husband's face, tears streaming down his cheeks, held upright by their children. The surgical suite was cold and blindingly bright. Rebecca focused on the faces around her. Dr. Hayes, Dr. Crawford, the anesthesiologist, nurses whose names she tried to remember but couldn't quite grasp. "Okay, Rebecca," the anesthesiologist said, "I'm going to give you something to help you relax. Count backward from 10 for me. 10, 9, 8. Rebecca's vision blurred. 7, 6. Her last conscious thought was a prayer. "Please let me see George again." In the surgical waiting room, time moved differently. George sat with his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands, Rebecca's wedding ring pressed against his forehead. Jennifer sat on one side of him, Buddy on the other, both of his children a solid presence. Linda had gone to get coffee, and Patrick was on his phone, texting updates to extended family. The waiting room was designed to be comfortable, with soft chairs and calming colors, but nothing could ease the tension that filled the space. "Dad," Jennifer said after an hour of silence, "tell us a story about Mom. Something from before Buddy and I were born." George lifted his head, grateful for the distraction. "Did I ever tell you about the time your mother delivered a baby in the parking lot of a Walmart?" Both children shook their heads. "It was 1975, about a year after we got married. Your mother was working as a nurse at a small clinic in Uvalde. She just finished her shift and was heading to the store when she heard someone screaming. A woman had gone into labor in her car, and the baby wasn't waiting. "What did Mom do?" Buddy asked, leaning forward. "She ran over and delivered that baby right there in the parking lot," George said, a smile touching his face for the first time that day. "Sent someone to call an ambulance, grabbed supplies from her nursing bag, and brought that little girl into the world like it was the most natural thing in the world." "That sounds like Mom," Jennifer said softly. "The newspaper wrote an article about it," George continued. "Called her a hero. But when I asked her about it, she just shrugged and said it was her job. That's your mother, always doing what needs to be done, no matter what." The story opened the floodgates. For the next hour, they shared memories. Jennifer talked about how Rebecca had taught her to be strong, to stand up for herself, to never apologize for taking up space in the world. Buddy recalled how their mother had sat with him through countless nights of middle school homework, never making him feel stupid when he struggled with math. "She believed in us before we believed in ourselves," Jennifer said, wiping her eyes. "She still does." Linda returned with a carrier full of coffee cups and a bag of breakfast tacos. "You all need to eat something," she insisted, distributing the food with the authority of someone who wouldn't take no for an answer. George forced down half a taco, though it tasted like cardboard. Every minute felt like an hour, every hour like a day. At the 2-hour mark, a nurse came out to give them an update. "The surgery is progressing well," she said. "They've removed the damaged valve and are preparing to implant the new one. Dr. Hayes will come talk to you as soon as she's finished." It was simultaneously reassuring and terrifying. Reassuring because things were going well. Terrifying because they were only halfway through. Daniel Foster arrived around the 3-hour mark, looking uncomfortable in the medical setting but determined to be there. "I hope it's okay that I came," he said. "The crew all wanted me to let you know they're thinking of you. Praying for Mrs. H." "Thank you, Daniel," George said, standing to shake his tour manager's hand. "That means a lot. We've been getting calls from venues, other artists, media," Daniel said. "Everyone wants to help. Tim McGraw called this morning, said to tell you he's thinking about you." George appreciated the support, but he couldn't focus on anything beyond the surgery happening down the hall. Still, he recognized that Daniel had come to show support, and that mattered. At the 4-hour mark, George's phone buzzed with a text from one of his longtime band members. "We're all at rehearsal space lighting candles for Rebecca. She's the strongest woman we know. She's going to pull through." George showed the message to Jennifer and Buddy, and they huddled together, drawing strength from the outpouring of love. Finally, after 4 hours and 47 minutes, Dr. Hayes emerged from the surgical suite. She was still in her scrubs, her surgical cap pulled back, and George's heart stopped as he searched her face for clues. Dr. Hayes smiled, a small, tired smile, but genuine. "She did beautifully. The surgery went exactly as planned. We've replaced the valve, and her heart is already showing improved function." George felt his knees weaken with relief. Jennifer grabbed his arm to steady him, and Buddy let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Can we see her?" George asked. "She's in recovery now, still under anesthesia," Dr. Hayes explained. "It'll be another hour or so before she's awake enough for visitors. We'll come get you as soon as she's ready. She'll be groggy and have a breathing tube for a while, but she's going to be fine." After Dr. Hayes left, the family collapsed into their chairs, the tension finally breaking. Jennifer cried openly, and Buddy wrapped his arms around his sister. George sat down slowly, his hands shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline. "She made it," he said, as if saying it aloud would make it more real. "She's okay." Linda hugged him tightly. "I told you, Rebecca's a fighter." The next 90 minutes were the longest yet, now that they knew Rebecca was safe, but couldn't see her. George paced the waiting room, unable to sit still. He fielded calls from his band, from friends, from family members who had been waiting for news. Finally, a nurse appeared. "Mr. Strait, your wife is asking for you." George followed the nurse through a maze of corridors to the ICU. The room was filled with monitoring equipment, all of it beeping and whirring. And there, in the bed, was Rebecca. She looked small and fragile, a breathing tube still in place, IV lines running from both arms, but her eyes were open. And when she saw George, they filled with tears. George rushed to her side, taking her hand carefully. "Hey, sweetheart, you did it. You made it through." Rebecca couldn't speak with the tube, but she squeezed his hand weakly. A nurse explained that they'd remove the breathing tube once they were certain her oxygen levels remained stable. "Your children are here too," George said. "They'll come see you in a little bit, once you're more settled. Everyone's been so worried." Rebecca's eyes asked a question, and George understood immediately. The surgery was perfect, he assured her. "Dr. Hayes said your heart is already functioning better. You're going to be fine, Becca. We're going to have all those years we talked about." A tear slid down Rebecca's cheek, and George gently wiped it away. He stayed by her side as nurses bustled around, checking vitals and adjusting medications. When they finally removed the breathing tube, Rebecca coughed and gasped. But then her breathing steadied. "Hi," she croaked, her voice rough from the tube. "Hi yourself," George replied, smiling through his own tears. "You scared the hell out of me." "Sorry," Rebecca whispered. "Love you. I love you too, more than anything in this world." Jennifer and Buddy were allowed in for brief visits. each of them holding their mother's hand and telling her how much they loved her. The relief on their faces was palpable. Their mother had survived, and now the journey of recovery could begin. That night, George refused to leave the ICU. The nurses set up a recliner for him in Rebecca's room, and he held her hand through the night, waking every time her monitors beeped, relaxing only when he confirmed she was still sleeping peacefully. Around midnight, Rebecca stirred and opened her eyes. "George?" "I'm here," he said immediately, moving to her side. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For making me tell you the truth. For being here." Rebecca's eyes were heavy with exhaustion and medication, but her gratitude was clear. "There's nowhere else I would be," George said simply. "There's never been anywhere else I wanted to be, but by your side." Rebecca fell back asleep with a small smile on her face, and George returned to his vigil. The worst was over. Now they just had to heal. Both Rebecca's heart and the trust that had been tested by her secret. But as George watched his wife sleep, he felt something shift inside him. They had been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. 3 months later, Rebecca stood in front of the bathroom mirror, examining the scar that ran down the center of her chest. It was healing well, fading from angry red to pale pink. She traced it with her finger, this new map of her survival, this reminder of how close she'd come to losing everything. "You about ready?" George called from the bedroom. "Almost," Rebecca replied, pulling on the soft blue blouse Jennifer had bought her for today. "Blue for hope," her daughter had said. Today was Rebecca's final appointment with Dr. Hayes, the one where she'd hopefully be cleared to return to normal activities. The past 3 months had been a journey of small victories. Walking to the end of the driveway, climbing stairs without getting winded, sleeping through the night without chest pain. George had been beside her every step of the way. He'd accompanied her to every cardiac rehab session, learned to cook heart-healthy meals, and transformed their home into a recovery haven. The tour remained postponed, and George showed no signs of impatience or regret. At Dr. Hayes' office, Rebecca went through the familiar routine: EKG, echocardiogram, stress test. Each test brought relief as the results came back positive. Her heart was functioning at 80% capacity now, a remarkable improvement from the 40% before surgery. "You're doing exceptionally well," Dr. Hayes said, reviewing the results. "Your valve is functioning perfectly, and your heart has responded beautifully to the reduced strain. I'm clearing you for all normal activities." "Does that mean she can travel?" George asked. "We've been talking about taking a trip?" Dr. Hayes smiled. "Absolutely. Just use common sense. Don't overdo it. Listen to your body. Keep up with your medications. But yes, Rebecca, you can live your life fully now." In the car on the way home, Rebecca felt lighter than she had in months. "Where should we go?" she asked George. "You mentioned Europe, Australia." "Actually," George said, "I've been thinking about something else first. Something closer to home." He pulled into a cafe parking lot instead of heading toward their house. Inside, Daniel Foster was waiting at a corner table, along with Chelsea Armstrong and several other members of the tour crew. "What's going on?" Rebecca asked, suspicious but intrigued. "Sit down, Mrs. H," Daniel said warmly. "We have a proposition for you." Over coffee, they laid out their plan. The tour would resume in 6 weeks with a special concert at the AT&T Stadium in Dallas, the same venue where Rebecca had collapsed. It would be filmed for a documentary, with proceeds going to heart health awareness. "But here's the thing," Chelsea said, leaning forward. "We want to make it special. A celebration not just of George's career, but of your recovery, Rebecca. A night that honors everything you've been through." "I don't need to be honored," Rebecca protested. "This should be about George and his music." "You are part of the music," George said quietly. "You always have been. And I want to do something that night. Something I should have done a long time ago." Over the next 6 weeks, preparations intensified. George returned to rehearsals, though he was careful never to overextend himself or be away from Rebecca for too long. The documentary crew followed them, capturing candid moments of recovery and resilience. Rebecca was initially uncomfortable with the cameras, but Chelsea had a way of making everyone feel at ease. The interviews focused not just on the medical crisis, but on the strength of family, the power of honesty, and the importance of putting health first. "I want other women to see this," Rebecca said during one interview. "I want them to know that sacrificing your health for others isn't noble. It's dangerous. Take care of yourself so you can take care of the people you love." The message resonated. Even before the documentary aired, clips shared on social media went viral. Women across the country began sharing their own stories of delayed medical care, of putting everyone else first, of learning, sometimes too late, that self-care isn't selfish. 2 weeks before the concert, George disappeared into his home studio for hours at a time. Rebecca knew he was working on something, but respected his creative process enough not to pry. She could hear fragments of melody through the door, heard him singing the same lines over and over, adjusting and perfecting. Linda came over one afternoon while George was at rehearsal. The two friends sat on Rebecca's beloved porch, sipping iced tea and watching the Texas landscape shimmer in the heat. "How are you really doing?" Linda asked. "And I want the truth, not the version you tell everyone else." Rebecca considered the question carefully. "I'm grateful," she said finally. "Grateful to be alive. Grateful for a second chance. But I'm also still processing everything. The fear doesn't just go away because the surgery was successful." "What are you afraid of?" Linda asked gently. "That I'll wake up one day and it'll all have been borrowed time," Rebecca admitted. "That something will go wrong with the valve, or my heart will fail anyway, or—" She stopped, fighting tears. "I'm afraid of leaving George, of not getting all those years we talked about." Linda took her hand. "That's normal, Becca. You went through a trauma, but you can't live in fear. You fought too hard to get here to spend your days worrying about what might happen." The conversation helped, as Linda's wisdom always did. Rebecca realized she needed to truly embrace this second chance, not just survive it. The night before the concert, the entire Henderson family gathered for dinner at the house. Jennifer and Patrick, Buddy and his girlfriend, Rachel Bennett, whom he'd been dating for 6 months. Linda was there too, along with Daniel and several band members who had become like family over the years. George raised his glass of wine. Rebecca stuck with sparkling water due to her medications. "I want to make a toast," he said. "3 months ago, I almost lost the most important person in my world. Tomorrow night, we celebrate not just music, but life. Rebecca's life, our life together, and all the lives we've been blessed to touch through this crazy journey." "Here, here," Buddy said, and everyone clinked glasses. After dinner, George pulled Rebecca aside. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led her to his studio, where his guitar sat waiting. "I wrote something," he said, settling onto the stool. "For you. I'm going to perform it tomorrow night, but I wanted you to hear it first." George began to play, and Rebecca recognized the chords immediately. They were reminiscent of "I Cross My Heart," the love song that had become their unofficial anthem. But these lyrics were new, personal, written from the depths of George's heart. The song was called "The Keeper of My Heart," and it told their story, meeting at that honky-tonk in Kerrville, building a life together through struggles and triumphs, facing the terror of almost losing each other, and emerging with an even deeper appreciation for their love. By the time George reached the final verse, Rebecca was crying openly. Through every storm, through every scar, you've been the keeper of my heart. And when I almost lost you there, I learned that nothing else compares to the love we've built through all these years, worth more than fame, worth more than cheers. So here's my promise, here's my vow, forever yours, then and now. George, Rebecca whispered when he finished. That's beautiful. It's the truth, he said simply. Tomorrow night, 80,000 people are going to hear what you've always known, that you're the reason for everything good in my life. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. Rebecca had her hair and makeup done, feeling simultaneously glamorous and uncomfortable with the attention. She wore an elegant navy dress that Jennifer had helped her pick out, with a shawl to cover her surgical scar. At the stadium, the energy was electric. Fans began arriving hours before showtime, many carrying signs that read, "We love you, Rebecca," and "Prayers for Mrs. Strait." The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Backstage, George went through his pre-show routine, but Rebecca could see he was nervous in a way he rarely was before performances. "You okay?" she asked, adjusting his collar. "I've played 1,000 shows," George said. "But tonight feels different. Tonight matters more." The opening acts performed to thunderous applause, warming up the crowd. Rebecca watched from the VIP section with Jennifer, Buddy, and their partners, surrounded by friends and family. The documentary crew captured it all, their cameras discreet but ever-present. Finally, the lights dimmed and the crowd erupted as George took the stage. He opened with Unwound, his first major hit, and the audience sang along with every word. For the next 90 minutes, George delivered a masterclass in country music, performing hit after hit. Rebecca watched her husband command the stage, seeing him through fresh eyes. This was his gift, his calling, and she understood anew why the tour had meant so much to him. But she also saw the glances he cast toward where she sat, the way he smiled when their eyes met, the constant awareness of her presence. As the show neared its end, George motioned for the band to quiet. The massive stadium fell silent, 80,000 people holding their collective breath. "Y'all have been so generous with your support these past few months," George said, his voice carrying through the venue. "When we postponed this tour, you didn't demand refunds. You sent prayers. You shared your own stories. You reminded my family that we're not alone in this world." He paused, and Rebecca felt her heart begin to race. "What most of you don't know is that my wife, Rebecca, spent 3 months hiding a serious heart condition from me because she didn't want to interrupt this tour. She valued my dreams more than her own health. And when I found out, when I nearly lost her," his voice broke, and he had to stop for a moment. The stadium was so quiet Rebecca could hear her own heartbeat. "It made me realize that I've spent 40 years singing about love," George continued. "About heartache and healing, about devotion and dedication. But the greatest love story I've ever known isn't in any song I've recorded. It's the life I've lived with Rebecca Henderson." George gestured toward the VIP section. "Becca, sweetheart, could you come down here?" Rebecca's eyes widened in panic. She shook her head, but Jennifer was already helping her to her feet. "Go, Mom," her daughter whispered. "He needs you there." On shaking legs, Rebecca made her way down to the stage. A crew member helped her up the steps, and suddenly she was standing in front of 80,000 people, the lights blinding, her husband reaching for her hand. "This woman," George said, his arm around Rebecca's waist, "has been my partner, my best friend, my compass, and my conscience for 42 years. She's raised our children, supported my career, and kept me grounded when success could have taken me somewhere dark. And 3 months ago, she survived heart surgery that she needed because she was too busy taking care of everyone else to take care of herself. Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't look away from George's eyes. "I wrote a song," George said, "for her. It's the most important song I've ever written, because it's the most honest. And Rebecca, I want you to stay here while I sing it. I want everyone to see the woman who's been the keeper of my heart." A crew member brought out a stool, and Rebecca sat, her legs too weak to support her. The band began to play, and George's voice, that iconic, perfect voice, filled the stadium with "The Keeper of My Heart." As he sang, images appeared on the massive screens flanking the stage. Photos of their life together, their wedding, young and in love. George on stage in small venues with Rebecca in the audience. Their children as babies, as toddlers, as graduates. Family vacations and quiet moments. Recent photos from Rebecca's recovery, showing the reality of hospital rooms and rehabilitation. The audience was silent, mesmerized. Many were crying, moved by the raw emotion in George's voice, by the vulnerability of this intensely private couple sharing their story so publicly. When George reached the final verse, he knelt in front of Rebecca, still singing, his voice breaking with emotion but never faltering. Rebecca covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed by the love radiating from this man who had been her everything for more than 4 decades. As the last notes faded, the stadium exploded. 80,000 people rose to their feet, applauding, cheering, crying. The standing ovation went on for 5 full minutes, waves of love washing over the stage. George pulled Rebecca to her feet and held her close, his face buried in her hair. Over the roar of the crowd, Rebecca heard him whisper, "I love you. Forever. Forever." Rebecca whispered back. When they finally separated, George addressed the crowd one last time. "Thank you for letting me share her with you tonight. Thank you for reminding us what community means. And please, if you take anything from tonight, let it be this. Tell the people you love that you love them. Take care of your health. Don't wait until it's almost too late." He began the final song of the night, "I Cross My Heart," and this time, he sang it directly to Rebecca, their eyes locked, the world falling away until there was nothing but the two of them, and the promise they'd made 42 years ago. 6 weeks later, Rebecca and George stood on a beach in Hawaii, their toes in the sand, watching the sun set over the Pacific. It was their first real vacation in years, a chance to finally slow down and simply be together. "How do you feel?" George asked, wrapping his arms around Rebecca from behind. She thought about the question. Her scar had faded to a thin line. Her heart was strong. Her fear had diminished, replaced by gratitude and joy. "I feel alive," Rebecca said. "Really, truly alive." "Good," George murmured against her ear, "because we have so much living left to do." The farewell tour resumed the following month, but on modified terms. Fewer dates, longer breaks between shows, and Rebecca with George for every performance. She no longer stayed in the shadows, but stood proudly in the wings, a visible reminder of what truly mattered. "The Keeper of My Heart" was released as a single, with all proceeds going to heart health awareness and research. It became George's first #1 hit in 5 years, but more importantly, it sparked a national conversation about cardiovascular disease in women and the importance of prioritizing health. Women across America shared their stories, inspired by Rebecca's honesty. Hospital emergency rooms reported increases in women seeking help for cardiac symptoms they'd been ignoring. Lives were saved because Rebecca had been brave enough to share her story. Jennifer called one evening with news. "Mom, you're not going to believe this. The American Heart Association wants you to speak at their annual gala." "Me?" Rebecca was incredulous. "I'm not a speaker." "You're a survivor," Jennifer corrected, "and your story matters." So Rebecca, who had spent a lifetime supporting from the shadows, stepped into the light. She spoke at the gala, sharing her story with a ballroom full of cardiologists, researchers, and donors. Her message was simple but powerful. Women's hearts matter, and self-care isn't selfish. The speech was recorded and shared online, reaching millions. Rebecca became an unexpected advocate, using her platform as George Strait's wife to shine light on a cause that could save lives. 1 year after her surgery, Rebecca stood in Dr. Hayes' office for her annual checkup. The echocardiogram showed her new valve functioning perfectly, her heart strong and healthy. "You're a success story, Doctor," Hayes said warmly. "Not just medically, but in how you've transformed your experience into something meaningful for others." At home that evening, Rebecca and George sat on their porch, as they had thousands of times before. The Texas sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, and the cicadas hummed their eternal song. "Do you have any regrets?" George asked quietly. Rebecca thought about it, about the fear and pain, about the time lost to secrecy, about how close she'd come to losing everything. "No," she said finally. "Even the hard parts taught us something. They showed us what we already knew, but sometimes forgot. That love isn't just the happy moments. It's showing up for each other when things are terrifying. It's being honest, even when it's hard. It's choosing each other, every single day." George pulled her close. "I choose you, every day, for the rest of my life." "And I choose you," Rebecca replied. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into night. Two people who had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, who had nearly lost each other and found a deeper appreciation for their love. The farewell tour concluded 6 months later in San Antonio, George's hometown, where it had all begun. The final show was bittersweet, the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new chapter. On stage, for the last time, George brought Rebecca out for one final performance of The Keeper of My Heart. As they stood together, bathed in light, surrounded by the love of their community, Rebecca realized this was the moment she'd been fighting for during those terrifying months of secret-keeping. This moment, this life, this love, and it had been worth every struggle, every tear, every moment of fear. As the final notes of the final song faded away, George and Rebecca walked off stage hand in hand, leaving behind a legacy of music and love that would endure long after the lights went down. Their story wasn't just about a legendary country singer and his devoted wife. It was about two people who had built a life together through honesty, resilience, and unwavering commitment. It was about learning that taking care of yourself is an act of love for those who depend on you. It was about second chances and the courage to embrace them. Most of all, it was about a love so deep and true that it had survived everything life threw at it and emerged stronger than ever. In the years that followed, Rebecca and George traveled the world, finally taking those trips they'd always dreamed about. They celebrated the births of grandchildren. They volunteered with heart health organizations. They grew old together, exactly as they'd always planned. And on quiet evenings, sitting on their porch watching the Texas sunset, George would sometimes pull out his guitar and sing "The Keeper of My Heart," just for Rebecca. His voice softer now, but no less true. Because some loves are worth singing about, some loves are worth fighting for, and some loves last forever, written not in gold records or sold-out stadiums, but in the quiet moments two people share when the world falls away. and only their hearts remain. This was their love, their story, their triumph, and it was more than enough.